Welcome to Kali Tribune Podcast. In this episode, we'll talk about term re-enchantment of the world. Now, this term comes as an inversion of the original term de-enchantment or Entzauberung in German of the world that was coined by German sociologist Max Weber. The original term, broadly speaking, covers the process of modernity, that is to say, a side effect of the process of modernity, which is that the world is becoming less and less mysterious. That is to say, that paradigm of modernity, sometimes called Enlightenment Paradigm, but I would rather use the term categories of reason, and I will explain why, makes the world more and more explained away, so to speak, so that there is nothing hidden in it, even potentially. Everything can be known, and can be known precisely in terms of categories of reason, or as maybe I would be so bold to say less informed people would put it, in categories of enlightenment. And as a guiding leitmotif of this podcast, I will peruse the article written by Mary Harrington, a British author that, if you never heard about Mary, who is a rather popular writer, she describes her position as a reactionary feminist. I don't know what that means. It doesn't sound too interesting to me. But Mary is a very, very intelligent lady. Great sense of humor, by the way, understated British humor. And this article she wrote about the subject I'll try to cover now is really pretty good and insightful. Although, as I shall try to show, going only halfway and not by accident. Now, when I said what the enchantment of the enchantment of the world is, let's talk about re-enchantment. Re-enchantment should be the process of making world mysterious again, or, as I would put it, drawing the world out from the categories of reason. Mary puts it different, and now we'll see what she says, because we'll use this as a starting point, and I think you'll find it more understandable for the beginning of this talk, because I use rather unfamiliar terms to most people. She doesn't. She's better versed in popular culture and works from that. The title of the article is Aliens Are Among Us. Governments don't want us to believe there's, quote, something out there. Now this there's something out there is in fact Mary's use of the byline from the American science fiction TV show X-Files. Mary, as we shall see, is not so much into aliens and UFOs here, but something that is intrinsic to human beings and human consciousness, as she would put it. So let's quote for a start what Mary says. Recently, I'm quoting, the X-Files seems to have escaped into real life. US Congress was reported last week, by the way, our article was published some month ago, so she's referring to something in January, beginning of January, to have received a secret briefing on UFOs, or, as they are known these days, UAPs, unidentified anomalous phenomena. This follows revelations last year from David Grush, a former US intelligence official turned whistleblower, who alleged that the USA is in possession of partially intact alien vehicles and other evidence of extraterrestrial life. Now, why Mary quotes this? Because really in the public sphere, the idea that there are visits from beings from another planets are really becoming mainstream. Strangely enough, it doesn't create much fuss. It would create much more fuss 30 years ago. And this is also, as Mary notices herself, not accidental. So, continues Mary, according to Grush, governments have since 1945 been engaged in a sub rosa technological race to reverse engineer alien technology. In the wake of the media storm this caused, pressure has mounted on US authorities to reveal the truth. What then is going on? Are aliens trying to make contact? If not, why are they creeping into the public consciousness now? Why now? Asks Mary, and this is the basis of her article, and it is rather a good basis, as we shall see. So, what Mary wants to say here is that something unexplained and perhaps unexplainable is coming into mainstream as the component of the worldview. This is something that connects this rather pedestrian, in my opinion, story about UFOs to the notion of the re-enchantment of the world, because truly this is making a world not really enchanted, I would say, but science fictional. But we have to bear in mind just one note: science fiction is a companion of modern science, of the modern scientific worldview from the beginning. So science fiction is not something trifle. Most of the post-humanist avant-garde is in fact science fictional avant-garde, because science fiction is a projection of infinite possibilities that is intrinsic to modern worldview, to worldview that is based on the being as possibility that can be formed, at least theoretically, by human agency, by the light of human reason, into something in the future. It's always because science, modernity, science fiction are all pointed to the future. The arrow of time is irreversible future. And the most and maybe only important dimension of time or vector of time is future. And now I'll just quote the crux of the Mary's article, her main question. Mary says, quote, I suspect the truth may be less, quote unquote, out there than in here. That is, the phenomena we have for some time called aliens were always real, and what's changing is our shared relationship to reality. Shared relationship to reality, says Mary. When I suggest the aliens were always real, I don't mean little green men in spaceships. I mean that the world has always been stranger than the dominant Enlightenment style scientific paradigm allows. The scientists and researchers of the Age of Reason, which began with Francis Bacon and reached its high point in the 19th century, imagined the universe as a kind of giant clockwork mechanism. Its inner workings could, they postulated, be made intelligible if dismantled and analyzed. But as it turned out, once you dismantle things to the smallest possible level, it all goes weird. End quote. Now, weird is the main term for Mary, and quite justifiably so. Because what comes out from beneath the so-called Enlightenment style paradigm is indeed best described as weird, because weird means unexplained, and I shall try to demonstrate it is unexplainable. Now let us hash out what Mary has in mind here, and I'll explain what I have in mind to boot. So she works from this traditional modern assumption that what they in English language is sometimes called in a phrase reason and logic paradigm is in fact the paradigm of enlightenment. By enlightenment, it's meant a Newtonian worldview, and with some right, because what we understand to be original French Enlightenment had as a very important component Newtonian physics that was propagated with all power he could muster by Voltaire. The reason is that enlightenment is based on the idea that human reason is absolutely autonomous. Light. Remember, light is the main symbol for reason, for intellect. And this is not, and hence enlightenment, but this is not enlightenment symbol, this is Christian symbol that has roots in antiquity, but in Christianity it was worked out in all its implications. And it's not really, originally it's not really a metaphor. The intellect truly is reason, but it is even autonomous, but it is not original light, and we'll come to that in due time. So this autonomous reason, as I would compact the Enlightenment idea, is faced with the world of phenomena. Originally they didn't use that word, but we'll come to that in a moment. But I say that the world that is primarily reality of five senses, given to five senses, and intelligibility found in this world that light of reason works with, is not the intelligibility of things, but the laws, natural laws that govern these sensible phenomena, this visible world. Please mind you, at the very beginning, not the causes that govern the world, but laws that govern the world. This is the main turning point of modernity, because in old style metaphysics, in metaphysics of tradition, as I like to call it, it's not laws but causes. You don't seek laws at all. You seek them only in technical production, but you don't even formulate them as laws. It's like understood like when you build some kind of machine. All autonomous machines were not built in Middle Ages, for instance, or antiquity, at least not built en masse as something that is self-explanatory, that machine has to be autonomous. You were just working with side effects of causes and effects. Those side effects are now understood as laws, and the main thing to research. Now, this produces this idea of clockwork mechanism. Now, this is 19th century, 18th to 19th century. In 20th century, it already got transformed into something different. And how the weird comes into it. Well, I would say that very idea to understand the world in this form is weird in itself, but it is predictable, because the very cause of what Weber understood as the enchantment of the world was this predictability, because science is built on predictability, that phenomena will conform to the laws at all times. This idea that phenomena conform to the laws at all times, that is to say, that phenomena conform in the way that is general, always valid and necessary, comes from Immanuel Kant's solution of the skeptical challenge. That was all the rage in the late 18th century Germany. Now, I work on some assumptions here that I cannot really defend in extenso in the short amount of time I take for these podcasts, which are never short, by the way. So imagine how long this would be if I gave my tongue a free rein, a few hours at least. I consider Kant's solution of this problem as paradigmatic to modernity. There are other voices who would say that it is not true, but I think it is, and I think it shows now, and I'll speak about it later. Now, I said that I'm not using Mary's notion of Enlightenment Paradigm. I use the notion of categories of reason, and this is, when those in the know are already aware of this, probably this is Kant's term. Now, what does this mean? Well, broadly speaking, David Hume and his admirers in Germany in Kant's time worked on the notion that there is no necessary connection between cause and effect. Now, all of them, from Hume and even before him, and later, after him, using the term cause and effect in a very narrow sense of mechanical cause and effect, and mechanical in the most mechanical sense of the word, of pushing things, literary. This is not the original notion of the cause and effect. Cause and effect is far wider notion, and as with all metaphysical notions, you cannot really slice it in pieces, to take one aspect of the notion and completely jettison others. This is the modern approach. This is impossible. The notion as a whole loses its meaning and sense, and this is something that Hume figured out, because there is nothing in a sensual world of five senses, that would provide us with a necessary cause to a given effect. For instance, as Hume liked to point out, the effect of the rising sun in the morning or setting sun in the evening is not something that is giving us any right to say that we know the cause and effect of this occurring, because it is possible that it will not occur. There is no necessary connection, yet it happens with regularity. And Hume's primitive solution to this problem, although it is not solution at all, it's just forgetting about it, is that this is all built on belief, that is to say, on habit, let's say. And this is, let's say, classical skeptical position. It was known in antiquity, although in antiquity skeptics were far more subtle skeptics like Sextus Empiricus and such people. And this was picked up throughout Europe as a philosophical position, together with the position of John Locke to some extent, and so on. And then comes Kant. Kant solved this problem in the following way, as is known in history of philosophy. There is a regularity. There is something that remains fixed in all this. And this is because the cause and effect is not something that exists in nature. Cause and effect is the category of reason, is one of the 12 categories of reason that Kant puts in the table of categories. And everything that occurs in this world occurs in the pattern, according to the pattern of these categories, which translates into conclusion that world as such is modeled in the framework of the categories of reason. World as it is beyond reason is something that is unknown to us. But this is very important to note. For Kant, being unknown doesn't mean being inexistent. And this world beyond categories and beyond phenomena and beyond space and time, by the way, because space and time are intuitions that give a world its durability and substance, its framework, that fill these categories with content. He calls thing in itself, or things in themselves, Ding an sich. This notion was reviled in Germany of Kant's time. Even the most faithful adherents of Kant, as Johann Gottlieb Fichte, who called his own system, so-called of philosophy, Kant's philosophy, couldn't stand it. He did everything he could to jettison this thing in itself from Kant's philosophy. And people, most of them, thought that this was just a Kant's attempt to rule out something that he couldn't explain during his lifetime. He made the groundwork, and now they'll do what is necessary to jettison this thing in itself. So why it bothered them so? Well, because in Kant's time, those the main clash in philosophy was between rationalists, or that were also called by him dogmaticists, and skepticists and empiricists, people who believe on the one hand in this sole validity of empirical foundation of everything, while others, these dogmatics or rationalists, thought that notions and concepts give true knowledge, and this is the basis of these are the two bases of two forms of modern metaphysics, and both are, in my opinion, rather worthless, but never mind that now. For all of them it was senseless. So for empiricists, if there are things in themselves, they have to be known in some way, because everything can exist only in terms of five senses, so things in themselves are also something that you have to comprehend in terms of five senses, whereas rationalists thought in terms of concepts. It has to be possible to conceptualize these things, and these things are, for instance, thing in itself would be the thing that is not conditioned by category of cause and effect, for instance. Now note category. This is something rather different than when Aristotle tells you everything that is has a cause, except first cause. No, this is category of reason. For Aristotle, things in themselves are something that you grasp with your mind. Here, you don't grasp them anymore, you grasp phenomena, because you are on the one hand dependent on your own light of reason, and on the other hand what corresponds to this light. And what corresponds to this light, if it is taken in itself as a completely isolated, as self-reliant, absolutely, is sensual reality it encounters, because this is the first thing we know. And assumption is, in contrast to traditional metaphysics, that there is nothing not beyond, but inside this reality. There is nothing intrinsically intelligible in it. This is very important to understand. So the cause and effects are just the means we comprehend the world. So here comes the weird part. Kant never rejected things in itself. He considered it the central notion of his philosophy, and I would agree that he was right about that. Thing is in itself is what you know exists, but you cannot know what it is. You are not equipped to know what it is. This bothered people a lot because they worked from the paradigm that everything must eventually become known and disposed to I would say technical and political machinations, manipulations, because this is the modern paradigm of man and man's reason as a center of the world. And Kant tried to put a kind of lid on things. He tried, because he was a very, very talented philosopher. He had this spark of tradition in himself, and he knew he has to put some confines to this rationalism. On the other hand, he knew that empirism and skepticism are plainly wrong. There are causes and effects. And what he did with the thing in itself is very interesting. Thing in itself is not some kind of mysterious beyond at first sight. It's not something, it's not God, it's not angels. Most people think that this is what he has in mind. No. Things in themselves are plainly, all things you encounter if you would encounter them without stuffing them into your own categories. For Kant, the world as it is, in most mundane aspects of it, the very kitchen sink you wash your dishes in becomes a mystery, because you cannot know it. You don't grasp it as it is. This is very important to understand, because in tradition this is matter of course, and I think it is matter of course that you know things and you know causes and effects, but you are not limited by your finite intellect. You are limited because the finitude of this intellect comes from the fact that it is created. You have given you have been given a given datum. By the way, given is the term that Kant often uses, but this term comes from, I think the first one to use it, and don't quote me, this was Plotinus, but it is mainly a Christian term in Christian metaphysics and theology, because given implies that there is a giver. Strangely enough, Kant always uses this. For Kant, everything that is not conditioned by us, that we get to know from outside of us, of our powers, is a given. In Christianity, everything is a given. But strangely enough, the fact that everything is a given, everything you have to deal with, including yourself, leaves you with far wider field of intelligibility, because the assumption is that the given, that something is being given, it has intrinsic light that corresponds to the light of reason, through which you are given to understand things. This is the intelligibility of things, also known as being. In Middle Ages, ens universalis or ens communium. Is it right declension? I don't know, never mind. Communal, universal being, beingness of everything. And this beingness, every single thing, or even thought, not thought, but let's say a relation of thought and thing, is something that is. This is, in general, the aspect of all things in this world, all creation. And this is something that mind is in touch with. And I talked a lot and wrote a lot about this, so I won't go into digressions about it. And this is something that is completely lost in modernity. And I think that Kant's solution to skeptical problem is the acme of modernity. We never moved beyond it. That is to say, and now we come to the crux of the matter, we are now moving from beyond it, but going beyond through the way that was pointed by modernity. We are not going back from Kant. We are not going back to reclaim the origin. We are just falling through the ground, I would say. We are losing ground under our feet. What this means, and I will conclude this part of the podcast, so in order not to make it too long and abstract, and I promise the other one will probably be more interesting because we'll talk about UFOs, Vila, that's in Croatian, elf, Vukodlak, werewolves and such funny things, and horror movies. So I'm just in line with how Kali Tribune works. I always do everything upside down. The most important thing, most interesting and colorful things I put at the end, while I begin with these abstract things. Guess that's some kind of unconsciously doing a triage of people who have endurance to go through first half an hour or so to get to the meat of the matter. Anyway, the weirdness Mary talks about, and I will claim, comes not from losing of Enlightenment paradigm. It comes from dissolution of the autonomous, isolated human intellect, which is the essence of modernity, which is the driving engine of modernity. It's falling apart, and it's falling apart for a very long time. But I think after, if we speak in historical terms, after the fall of Berlin Wall, everything just nosedived, and modern world is forfeited. It is not here anymore. I mean, you cannot grasp anything of modernity anymore. I know, because I was born at the end of modernity, and I remember it oh so well. But this is not the same age. We are living in a completely different age. And this weirdness and enchantment that is coming now, when the categories of reason are falling apart, is things in themselves starting to prod us. And the way they are prodding us is not pleasant. It is, in fact, horrifying. Therefore, in the next episode, we'll peruse a lot of imagery from horror movies, because I don't do this usually, this Slavoj Žižek method. But in fact, there is, but I don't reject it altogether also, that you explain some things through this popular pop culture phenomena. There is merit to it. And this, because they give you a sense of how people feel about truth that they are uncovering, unconsciously maybe, or even consciously. And the sentiment, this weirdness that is slipping back in the world from below our feet, mind you, this is very important, not from above our heads, is horrifying, in fact. And horror movies give the best description of what's going on. So to conclude, what I'll try to show is that a re-enchantment of the world is not something one should be happy about. Mary Harrington, I noticed from her writing from Beyond the Lines, is happy about it, but she's very, very wrong. There is nothing good about it. It's a very frightening situation. But we'll talk about it in the second part of this podcast. Thank you for your attention. This is Branko Malic from Kali Tribune.